everyone. Welcome back to Hella Friends, the podcast where we explore women's empowerment, diversity, and inclusion, and the soundtrack to it all. My name's Brandy, and I'm here with Chrissy.
Hello. This episode today, we are going to talk about Brandy's newest book release called Wrongful, A True Story, which is available where all books are sold right now. This is the hard copy, if you would like to get a reference for when you go and click on it. So this book is kind of special a little bit because this is, just like what it says, a truthful story, Brandy. So I know that this was a tough one for you to write just because of the topic and what it was about. But let's go ahead and dive in. You ready?
Oh, yeah, I guess. I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Okay. So what inspired you to tell the story?
I honestly did not want to tell this story, to be honest. My friends who, and I think maybe there was 4 people who knew what I had gone through, everybody said, including you, you need to let other people know because it could help other parents.
Right.
It really could, because what happened with me and my kiddo was something that's not out of the ordinary, but it's something that most people have no idea is going on. And it was really hard to write. This happened 6 years ago, and
Right.
I just released this book because I had a lot of healing to do from this.
Sure.
So it was people telling me, you can help other people if you wrote about it. And so that's what I did. I wrote about it.
So what does the title itself, Wrongful, what does that mean?
So, my son, when he was 17 years old, was wrongfully incarcerated for no crime at all. There was no crime committed. There was no real charge committed. And everything that happened in his case was just wrong. And so in writing about it and journaling about it, when I went back and I was like doing the research for the book, the only word that I used repetitively was wrong.
Right.
Because everything around it was just wrong. So in choosing a title, what better word than wrongful?
Wrongful. That's right. So I had the pleasure of getting a, what do you call them?
It's an author's release.
Author's release.
You got a special early copy.
I did get an early copy. And I read it while I was on vacation, and I was completely engulfed in it. So it although it's full of information and full of emotion, it was a good read.
Well,
if you will.
I'm glad. I'm glad that it was. I'm hoping that it would sell, so it is a good read.
But I mean, in a sense that if you sit down, you're pretty much going to read it all the way through because you're going to want to know what
happens next.
What happens next.
Okay.
So it's not a casual read, if you will. Like read it and then put it down and pick it back up. That's where I was going with that.
Okay.
But if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of touch on a couple of different things that I found provocative, if you will, just because I don't feel like enough people are talking about it. And I feel that both of us are in a position to kind of give our own feedback because I struggled with this particular passage. Even with my daughter. For those who don't know, Brandy and I both have an interracial relationship. So our children are biracial. And one of the things that you touched on, Brandy, was, I think it was chapter that is labeled different. The time when you took Josh to the pediatrician.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, can I read just a
Yeah,
little
that's
bit
fine.
of what you said? So this is what I took from it. During Joshua's inaugural visit to the pediatrician, faced with a perplexing task of selecting a race from a checklist, I found myself at a loss. Uncertain of which box to mark, I hesitated, grappling with the weight of this seemingly innocuous yet deeply consequential decision. In that moment of hesitation, Joshua's father, with the conviction that resonated through the room, boldly declared, "Put American." Initially taken back by the audacity of his proclamation, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disapproval at the perceived indiscretion. That alone, I've struggled with that with my girl, my youngest, and it's kind of like one of those moments where you're just kind of like, you want to be defiant because it's like you don't want to label your children,
Yeah.
but yet you don't also want to discredit any part of
Who they
them
are,
or
yeah.
who they are. So what were you, what led you to include that in this?
Because a lot of this story deals with racial diversity and racial injustice. And in the late 90s, when my son was born, I didn't realize just how much of an impact a box check would make on their lives. And that was pivotal to me because when I see my children, I don't see them as all black or all white or anything, because
Right.
they're just not. They're
Right.
not all of anything. They're not all of just one race. But other people see them like that.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me. And that was the reason why I put that in there, because just because they are all kinds of different things in this great American fabric doesn't mean other people are going to see them that way.
Right.
So it was something that I felt needed to be told, because a lot of parents don't realize the impact that has on your kid just growing up.
Right.
Because they are American.
Right.
His dad wasn't wrong. He really is an American.
Right.
He was born and raised here. But just because he's American doesn't mean that he gets treated like a regular American.
Right. Exactly. Because I think we're still trying to figure out what does American mean.
Yeah.
So no, I totally understand that aspect, because you don't want to diminish any part of them in any way. But at the same time, it's like when they're off in school or what have you, they're labeled automatically just because they look a certain way. They look more of the other than one. So yeah.
Or even with Joshua, even based on his last name, because his last name is Hispanic.
That's right.
Yeah, and so, he based on his last name and just like at first glance at him, he looks like a true just dark Hispanic or a Brazilian or a Portuguese or even Dominican, and he's not.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I put that part in there, so people can understand. We still have a lot of divides, and even though that was close to almost 30 years ago, that still happens.
Yeah.
Like, that part hasn't changed.
Yeah, I know. When I was younger, and I would be filling out certain forms and things, I would always get frustrated because it was like, mark your ethnicity, mark your race. And it's like Hispanic. That's all I wanted to mark, because that's all I am.
Yeah.
So it was really, really hard
Yeah.
to be like, why are we putting people in boxes? It's like we're no longer these things. And I'm sure nowadays it's kind of like there's probably multiple boxes checked for certain individuals.
Well, see, I did that. I did that when I was younger, because I knew where I came from.
Yeah.
And so when I would ask my parents, what should I check? My mom said, you can check them all. And so I was like, cool, I'm just going to check them all.
Well, there you go. See, I left the other one blank. I just would always just do Hispanic and leave it at that.
No. And then, since I've become an adult, I've learned that those boxes are not there for our benefit.
Right. Right. I mean, it's a census.
Yep. Yeah. They're not there to help us by any means.
By any means.
No.
Exactly.
So I have gotten to where I just don't check those boxes. I don't want you to know what race I am. I don't want you to know what sex I am. Does it really matter?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter. It really does not.
Right.
So there's no reason why you need this information.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm if it's there, I'll mark it, but I'm more conscious of what I mark versus
Mark them all.
yeah, essentially, right? Probably tell my youngest to do that.
Yeah.
'Cause she's, she not struggles with, I mean, she embraces both sides, but I know it's a little bit difficult for her because she's been stopped a couple of times just by random people asking her, what are
race
you?
yeah.
No, it's not what race are you, it's what are you? And I'm like, why do you have to, why do you want to know?
Because we still live in a country where there's a very, very strong racial divide.
Yeah.
It has gotten better. It really has. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still a very bad presence on our country. And my kids get that all the time. They really do. Joshua's been asked if he's from Pakistan, and he's like, no.
Right. Yeah.
Jacob, they're like, what are you? Are you Dominican? Like, what? He's like, no, I'm none of those things. Why does it matter?
Right.
I'm a human being, so it should not matter. The color of my skin shouldn't impact you whatsoever, but it does.
But it does. It does. And it did, unfortunately, to
Yeah.
Josh. And that's why, he ended up having to go through all of this. So kind of going into where you are as a woman and as a Black woman and as a mother, I know that this was a very hard struggle for you to have to watch your son go through all of this. Another point that you had written in your book, you discuss about how Black women are portrayed in society because once everything happened, you took upon this fierce, I don't know if you want to kind of tell them what the gist of the story is about or so they can follow us just a little bit.
So when my son was 17 years old, he was wrongfully incarcerated for not committing a crime. He honestly was just out there being a dumb kid. He was running away. He was smoking weed. He was drinking. He was being a kid. He was being an adolescent. And in him being an adolescent, his biological father said, hey, maybe send him out here to the state of Nevada where he resides, and maybe a change of scenery would help. It didn't. Things just escalated and got worse to where he ended up in front of a judge. Judges in very, very small towns, especially predominantly Caucasian towns, don't take kindly to biracial children or Black children or Hispanic children. Any kid that is out of the norm for their little popularity. So Jacob didn't fit in. He didn't fit in, and the judge had it out for my kid because he didn't fit in.
Right.
And when all this happened, I had a label put on me too,
Right.
which I steer clear from labels for the most part. But this time was different because I had a person who was an authoritative figure who I couldn't really challenge, which was wrong for him to think I couldn't challenge him because I did.
Right. Right.
So I had a label put on me
Yeah.
as like a bad mom. And for anyone who knows me, they know my kids come first.
Yeah.
Like period, point blank. And this story pretty much tells you just how much my kids come first because I fought and I fought and I fought for my kid. But to have that label as like a single Black mom who pretty much, you can't get your child under control, so I'm going to do whatever I want to do with them.
Right.
That was the icing on the cake for me.
Oh, sure. That's you have no idea what I've been through and you made the decision as a parent to move him out of something to give him something better, so I can see how that can be.
It was,
almost like, not irritating. What's the word I'm looking for? Just very, angry. Like it would make you angry.
I was disrespected.
Yeah.
And I saw it like this. You don't know who I am. You don't
Right.
know who I know. You don't know what I've been through.
Right.
But yet this is what you think I am. Okay, let me show you that I'm not that person.
Right.
I'm not that mom. I'm not that mom that's just going to roll over and said, okay, well, this is what you said. That is not me.
Right.
That has never been me. And I didn't realize just how strong of a person I was until after all of this was over.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
So,
So in the book, you write, like many Black women, I felt compelled to portray an image of resilience and composure, even when struggling internally. We often conceal our pain and distress behind a mask of strength, perpetrating the myth that we are always okay. Perpetuating, sorry, the myth that we were always okay. So in a sense, you put on a happy face, but yet, like many mothers do, even in not in such extravagant cases, but even in small cases, you know, as mothers, we struggle. We have to put on, because we have to put on this facade that everything's fine. You have everything under control when you feel like everything's falling apart. And sometimes it might be falling apart, but yet you still have to put on that face that it's good. Everything's going to be fine, and remain positive.
so I was not okay, but I was still going to work every day.
Yeah.
And I was still going to work every day and coming home and having to deal with my husband and my older son and have a family and deal with my mother and just other variables of life. But Brandy was not okay. Like, I was not okay at all, because the only thing I could really focus on is how to get my kid out of this situation.
Right.
What do I have to do?
And not come off as an angry Black woman in the process.
Yes.
And immediately shut the other person down, shut the other system down, because, oh, here we go again. Here, this is, you know,
This is who
this is who they are, and another kid has, you know, can't be controlled, and it's because of this angry person that's standing in front of me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that. I was not angry with the judge. I wasn't, disrespectful. I wasn't belligerent. I didn't do any of that. I listened to what he said. I understood what he said. And then I took that, and I there's something that I know that my father taught me. There's always somebody else in charge. Always. There's always somebody else in charge. And we have a system of checks and balances. So there's somebody above you who can do something. So there's no reason for me to fight with you, like, at all.
Right.
I'm not going to fight with you. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to curse. I'm not going to do any of the things that
You expect me to do.
yes. I'm going to say okay. And then behind the scenes, I'm going to work all the magic that I can to undo what you just did.
Right.
So I didn't show anyone that I was angry or upset or mad. Now, my husband knew. My husband knew I was not okay. My older son knew I was not okay. A lot of people didn't. Like, I kind of shut off from everybody, even you. Like, you would call and you're like, hey, you doing okay? Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those phone calls.
Not okay.
Right.
And I didn't go into, like, a lot of detail about what was going on. It was just like, I know you're caring about me and you want to reach out to me, but I'm not okay right now.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute.
Right.
So I don't show people that part of me because, honestly, they don't really need to know. That's just fuel for the fire, and it builds on another stereotype. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not.
But you wouldn't reject a helping hand.
No, I wouldn't, and I didn't. There were certain people that I reached out to for advice because I hadn't, you're in a situation you've never been in before.
Right.
And around that time, the only thing that I understood and actually knew about was racism in our justice system. Because every day when I turned the news on, there was a young Black man getting murdered by the police.
Right.
Literally every day that year.
Yeah.
So there was a lot happening.
which is adds on to
Yeah.
all of the anxieties and the worries and the, you know,
And
the
then you,
feelings
you
that
start
you
to
have.
see just how unfair things are.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know it as a person of color, you know that it exists and it's out there, but then it came into my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it
And
comes
when
into,
you
yeah.
tried to for so long
and
to
to keep
shield
it.
it, to shield your kids from that,
Yep.
and to raise them to see no color, but yet when they go out there, and I think you touched on that in here, when they go out in the world, sorry,
Yep. Nope. You got to, this is your label.
That's who they are.
This is the box we've checked for you.
Right. Right. You just hope that you've instilled enough of, you know, kindness and goodness in them to where they can carry that into whatever relationships, whatever situations that they put themselves. But sometimes it's just not enough because
Nope.
sometimes the system is bigger than they are. And that's what happened, unfortunately, to Josh, is the system was bigger and stronger and at that moment for him.
Yeah. It's Jake. You keep saying Josh.
Oh, I do?
Yeah. Josh is the older
Oh,
one.
Josh is the older one. Why do I keep saying Jake?
Because
Josh.
I have too many J's in my family.
You do. You do. I'm sorry. It's Jake. My bad. Sorry, Jake. You're absolutely right. But yeah, even still, the struggle of not being labeled
I mean,
an angry black woman was a struggle, I'm sure.
it was. And even though I'm pretty sure that that's what I was labeled later on when I started talking to all these people in positions of power. And I didn't come across angry. I just stated the facts of to what was going on. And somebody needed to fix it. And if
Right.
you're not going to fix it, I'm going to go to this person over here. And if you're not going to fix it, I'm going to go to this person over here. So I don't think I came across as angry. In fact, all the state officials I talked to during this time applauded me for being the parent that I was. But I'm pretty sure later on, in the judge's case and in Jacob's public defender's case, I was labeled that person. And that's fine. I'll be that person because I did. I made their lives miserable, and I'm okay with that because they made mine miserable, and they took time away from me.
So where do you think, because you wrote a little bit of, or a lot about where you were mentally in that, and at what point did it just all come to a head for you?
When he came home. So when things are over and you can take a step back and look at what you've accomplished and done, that's when I kind of let go of who I was, because I knew I wasn't okay, and I was having massive mental breakdowns throughout this process. But it wasn't until my kid came home and you can, like, your shoulders come down and you can exhale, you realize the trauma that you've gone through. Because when you're in it and you're doing it, you don't think about it. But once it's over, that's when the trauma actually hits. And I would have just days when I would cry and cry and cry. My husband's like, "What's wrong?" And I would say, "It's over." And he's like, "Yes, and you won." But you don't feel like you won because you had to go through something incredibly traumatic that changed who you were internally. It changed how I looked at people. It changed how I felt about certain people. It really did something to me, and it did something to my child. And we're trying to figure that out. And so that's kind of when it was like, okay, yeah, this is very real what just happened to us. And I don't know if we're ever going to be the same again. And we're not. I can honestly say we're not the same people we were before this happened. Nobody in my family is. My husband's not. My older son's not. Nobody's the same. So it does. It takes a toll on you mentally when you have to go through those things.
Do you think that the journey just started versus it starting when everything happened?
No, I don't. I think it was the residual effects.
Okay.
I think it was like the aftershock effects.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a massive earthquake.
Yeah.
It's like a massive earthquake, and it's going on and it's going on and it goes on, and then it stops. and everyone assumes that they're okay and safe, and you check your belongings, you check your home, and then there's an aftershock, which you're not expecting. Like, it might happen, but you don't know how severe it'll be. You don't know the effects it'll have. That's exactly how we were going through things after he came home.
Yeah.
So it was just aftershock after aftershock. And you're trying to get back into somewhat normalcy. And things are just not normal any longer.
Right.
So that's hard. Like, how do you find your footing from that?
Sure. I'm sure he was filled with a lot of apprehension.
Yeah, because he was 17. And so it's like, okay, well, we're going to try to put our lives back together. So now you're going to go back to school. And, you've been in a detention center for 4 months. How do you do that? How do you go from being locked up and traumatized, from being a normal kid to having that happen, and then trying to go back to normalcy?
Right. Is he doing anything to help with that transition? It's 4 months, and but he's still moldable. He's still very much.
At that time, we talked, because he's 23 now. In fact, he'll be 23 on the 20th. At that time, we had a lot of conversations, and I really tried to get him to go to therapy, and he didn't want to go to therapy. He just felt like it was not something he wanted to do. So he went through his stuff on his own, and I was not privy to his healing process.
Okay.
I wasn't. Is he okay now? Yeah, absolutely. He's fine now. But for a period of time, he disconnected from me, especially when he turned 18. As soon as he turned 18, he moved out. And that was really hard because he just came home. Right. And so then he moved out. But I get it. He had to process stuff on his own. He was trying to become a young man and a young adult, and he had gone through something that most children don't go through. So he was kind of forced into a really bad situation, an adult situation, as a sheltered kid. So I didn't push. I wasn't forceful. I let him go that alone. And if he needed me for backup or reserve or anything, he knew I was there.
Okay. Do you think that he carries any type of grudge?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Is he more aware of who he is in the eyes of the law?
Oh,
and does
God,
he
yes.
does he take precautions?
Yes.
Okay.
He's okay. So, as my child is biracial, I have taught them never to hate anyone. When he came out of this situation, he hated everyone who was Caucasian, and he is Caucasian. And we had the whole conversation. How do you hate what you are? And he said, I don't claim that. And I was like, well, I guess that's your prerogative. So then we had to have an in-depth conversation about not everyone is like the people who did this to you. Your stepdad was right there with your mom, fighting for you and supporting you and making sure you are okay. And he's still doing that. He is not one of those people. So we've had several conversations about.
But I mean, his own dad is not that. His own father.
No, his dad's white.
No, I know, but he's not that.
No, he's not that type of person,
if you will.
But he, so it's been like this very fine balancing act with him trying to figure out who he can trust versus who he can't.
Right.
And there's a very few people who he does trust. And there's a whole lot of them who he doesn't. And I'm assuming that the further he goes on in life, because he's still really young, it'll get better. Because he didn't start off that way. It just so happened that that's what happened to him.
Yeah.
So, we have those conversations about, race relations and things like that. And he's very understanding, like, okay, my stepdad, he's cool people. Like, I get it. He's all right in our book. He's like, but other people I don't know about.
Yeah.
So I let him figure that out on his own.
Yeah.
Because he'll get there.
Hopefully he understands that the traits and the personalities that he sees in the people that he does trust, that's what he should seek in other people out there and be drawn to that. So hopefully he'll learn that level of discernment, that not all people are like.
And I'm
like
really
that.
trying to keep him from closing that door in his brain about people, because that's not how I raised my kids. And I told him that's how our country was built, because those types of hatreds festered. And so he understands that. It's just, I think with anybody, there's a level of hate you would have. And so you have to grow from that.
Yeah.
And he's young. He's young and he's trying to figure it out. And so I leave him alone. I don't let him know how I feel about certain things. I watch. And sometimes as parents, it's really hard to watch and not say anything.
Yeah.
But
they have to go
go through it.
Yeah, they have to go through it for themselves. In your chapter, Grown, this kind of is the chapter where he's, I believe he's already back home at that point. But one of the passages that you had kind of goes on the lines of what we were talking about. You said, yet even in the midst of the excitement of newfound independence, the lurk shadows of uncertainty and doubt, external pressures from society, family expectations, personal ambitions can cast a heavy cloud over a path forward, leaving young individuals feeling overwhelmed and apprehensive about their future. So I think that kind of sums up, basically what we were saying.
Yeah.
But I'm sure for him, all of those, and for you too, as a parent, all those other things that we have to worry about as parents, we hope that they don't limit our kids to the extent that they limited him at 17. That's a heavy load for a mom to carry, and you don't necessarily have to be a mom of a minority. It's just moms in general. You do what you can to instill in your children to be loving, kind individuals, but yet society out there has a totally different narrative.
The world is a very scary place.
And it's even more scarier now because of social media and because everybody has access to everything. And with a click of a button, if you want to be famous, you do something stupid or you do something super clever, and then you're overnight sensation. And next thing you know, you got millions of dollars in your bank account. But it's just, society is so different. And it's like we're progressing, but it's like, where are we progressing to? Like the areas we should be progressing.
We're not.
But yet there's these other areas where it's like, okay, but
what about this?
What's been instilled in these creatures here that are making bank? Like, what are they doing to put more towards what really needs to be,
I think
changed,
a lot
reformed?
Of when he became 18 was the fact that he was now legally an adult.
Yeah.
And so if he went out there and got into trouble or did something, I couldn't save him. I couldn't. There was nothing I can do. And then I had to think about it. I said, well, he's 18 now, so all the stuff that he was doing as a minor is not anything he can get in trouble for.
Right.
But it was still very scary because, when you're 18, you make bad life choices, just awful ones. And Jacob had made bad life choices prior to being 18 and got himself in trouble. And I was just like, I really hope now that he understands he's legally an adult, that those choices have very impactful consequences, because he just lived through some of them. And he has. Did he do some stupid stuff afterwards? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he did. But it wasn't anything that he wasn't able to take care of on his own. But that was the scary part for me, because my kiddo went through something that most young people don't go through.
Right.
And he was put in a situation where he was with kids who were murderers and children who were sex offenders and arsonists, and that is not the place you put a rebellious teenager.
Right.
So when he became an adult, yeah, I was very scared because I kind of looked at the world and I'm like, this is not the world I wanted for him. You know, granted, it's the same world I grew up in, but it's gotten progressively worse in certain aspects.
Especially in race.
Yes. So I was really terrified for my kids. And then they both moved out during COVID. They both moved out in 2020, and that was even more frightening. So I had just gone through something incredibly traumatizing with my youngest son, and now he's an adult, and now we have a global pandemic, and he moves out. And the only thing I could like hold on to was, you did what you were supposed to. You got them to grown. And that's the goal as a parent. You get them to grown. You get them to be successful, get them out of school, you get them to that point. What they do past that is on them.
Right.
But because I had gone through so much with this kiddo, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. And I called a lot, and I was like, hey, do you want to come over? He's like, no, I'm busy. Because he was really trying to be a young person. And it was hard for me to let that go. Like his brother, I was cool. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Him, not so much.
Yeah. Well, he's a baby.
Yeah, and I was really trying to just hold on to as much time as I could.
Yeah.
And at some point, my husband said, I really think you should go to therapy because you're not doing well. You're not doing well with any of this. And so I think you should go to therapy. And I did. I've been in therapy before, but I didn't realize just how broken I was until I went and talked to somebody. And that I did. I cried after my first therapy session.
Sure.
I cried real hard. And my husband said, you know, how'd it go? And I was like, oh, I'm crazy. Because it was the realization that, oh, yeah, you've been traumatized, like over and over and over again. And this was just the straw on the camel's back.
Right.
So we're going to take all that trauma
Right.
and we're going to try to decompress it.
Yeah.
And one session's not going to get it.
Right.
But some of these meds will help.
Yeah. Because it's different. It's a different type of trauma when it involves your kids.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that. Like I had been traumatized.
Right.
And, you know, I was doing okay with the trauma.
Because we learn to rationalize it. We learn to, you know, I mean, if you take the time to really dive into the traumas of the past and understand
what they are,
like
yeah.
why they occurred. Sometimes you're meant to go back to whoever is the one that inflicted that trauma on you. You have to be the bigger person to say, okay, what the hell happened to you when you were when you were younger and you were growing up, for you to do what you did to me?
Yeah.
You know, so I've been on that journey. I'm kind of still on that journey, you know, but it's different when something happens to your kids and you know that there's no one you know, you didn't inflict it on them, you know, so and so didn't inflict it on them. It's the stranger from the outside that inflicted this on your son. So it's like, how can you process?
You can't, it was so hard to like process that there was nothing I could have done to prevent it from happening.
Exactly.
And you try to internalize things, because I even went to him and I'm like, was I a bad parent? Is that why you were doing the stuff that you were doing that caused us to go down this road? And he was like, no, you weren't a bad parent at all. What makes you think that? He was like, this was me.
It's just like it's something in their head that just triggers to say, okay, I need to experience life. I need to experience this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Well, but you know, as a mom, you did everything that you could possibly do to make sure that they weren't raised either the way that you were, or that they weren't faced with certain struggles that you faced as a young one.
You have self-doubt. You have a lot
Oh,
of
for sure,
self-doubt.
because you wonder, what the heck am I forgetting that I did? That must have been a core memory for
And
them.
I was like, well, maybe I wasn't as involved as I should have been. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I
Right.
didn't do something that I should have done. And, maybe I yelled more than I should have.
And that's such a mom thing to do, because it's like we're the ones, even though technically it should be a two-part relationship, right?
Yeah.
We're the first ones to ingest all of that. It's our fault. Somewhere we went wrong.
But in that defense, though, parents screw up all the time.
Sure, they do.
And it's not a colossal screw up. Sometimes you just do something that you screw up. I yelled a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I yelled a lot, and I probably hit a little bit more than I should have.
Spanked.
I spanked.
Spanked.
Well, I mean, spank is hitting.
But spank sounds.
Does it?
It sounds. I mean, they're adults now, so it's not like anything.
Does it? Does it? So
90s kids know it's hit.
yeah,
But
or get your ass whooped.
right.
So
For everyone else, it's hit.
So you look at things like that and you wonder. You're like, what did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Did I go down the wrong path? What happened to where my kids did this or lashed out and did any of this? And my son, I had very real conversations with them. And
That's good.
my older one was like, well, these are some of the things that you did. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Because I was a really young parent. You have no idea what you're doing. And he said, Mom, you weren't a bad mom. He said, you did everything that you could have done. You gave us everything possible, like under the sun, that you could. So it didn't have anything to do with you. And he told me that while things were going on with Jake. Because I was like, what did I do? Like, what? Why are we here? It didn't have anything to do with me. But you try to put that blame on yourself because your kids are acting out. Right. You forget these are people who had personalities as soon as they came out your womb. And they're going to do what they want to do. It doesn't have anything to do with us. So it took a lot of therapy for me to be okay with those were the decisions he made. It didn't have anything to do with me. It did. It had everything to do with him. And my sister even said, young people do stuff like that. I didn't have that kind of stuff going on because I had different trauma when I was a kid. So I didn't get to explore like most young people do, like shoplifting or skipping school all the time. And, I was a little bit more reserved because I had big stuff going on in my family.
Right.
So I didn't know how to process that. I didn't. I was like, how hard is it to go to school and then come home and then have someone else take care of you?
Right. Right.
Like, how hard is it? But that's not what he wanted.
Right.
He wanted to go out and see what the world had to offer. And he did. He just got caught up in a way he shouldn't have.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about in another episode of breaking those generational curses, which now we call generational beginnings.
Yes.
But it's like certain vows vows. I took a vow for my daughter, and I think you kind of made one with your kids that you're going to do what you can to make sure that they didn't go through the challenges that you went through, right? Mm-hmm. So I totally get that but at the same time, they're their own people. So I often look back because mine was, I'm not going to move my kids around as much because I moved like crazy. So learning how to have a relationship is something that I learned way later on because I just never was in one place long enough to really build any type of friendships. So, but as a young mom, I was like, I'm not going to do that to my kids. I'm going to, do my best to stay put so they can go through elementary school with people they know. Mm-hmm. If we're lucky, they can go through high school with people they know. And then we're off to a great start. Life doesn't work that way.
Nope.
Because my oldest has a totally different personality than me. And now that I look back, it's like maybe she would have benefited from change. And even my youngest is completely fine with change. They're both completely fine with change. I struggled with change, like struggled hard, because I feel like I felt like, past tense, I missed out on things. I missed out on friendships and relationships, and knowing what it feels like to have people kind of just be there that you're familiar with, right? Because it's a handful for me. It's not anything from my past. It's a handful. So learning that later on, it was, I felt like I was doing the right thing by making sure that my kids weren't
like that,
like that, or had to go through that. So I totally understand the part where it's like, they're their own people, they're their own minds.
I had to learn that though, because my parents had 6 kids, and all 6 of us are completely different people. Every single last one of us. And I could see that, but my parents would try to treat us
all the same.
And we're not the same at all.
Right.
We're just not. So when I had my kids, like, I knew I was different. As a young person, as a really little kid, I knew I was different. I knew what I liked, I knew what I didn't like, and I wasn't gonna like get put in a box with my younger siblings. Didn't like that. Even in school, was not gonna be put in anybody's box. So when I had my kids, that was one thing I instilled in them: be who you are, like whatever you like. It doesn't matter what other people say, what other people think. Be who you are. And I have 2 totally different children.
Right.
They look totally different. They behave totally different. Their food choices are totally different. And I'm okay with that. They grew up in the same household. They still have the same values, but they're different people.
Right.
And so I act accordingly.
Yeah.
One has like street swag, and he's totally tattooed from head to toe. The other one is just a hardcore metal kid. Different people.
Yeah.
And I accept them the same. The household I had for them was whatever floats your boat.
Yeah.
We're not going to discriminate on music. We're not going to discriminate on clothing, hair choices, any of that.
Right.
This is who this family is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did the same with, especially with my youngest, and with my oldest too. We, very much, you are your own person, but there was still that part of me that was trying to protect them from something that I really didn't need to protect them from. The only thing that I really needed to do, and I realize that now as a mom to older children, is that they just needed you. They just needed to make sure that you were there when they needed you, and you provided for them. And essentially that's what I ended up doing. But it's just kind of not mind-blowing, but just I'm in awe of how different they are, but yet they have that core of treat everyone with kindness, don't see color, and that was something that my grandfather instilled in me. Don't just assume that somebody is a bad person by the way that they look, or by the way that they dress, or by the way that they talk. It's like there's reasons behind why people are the way they are. And are you going to take the time to, are you going to put out the energy enough to know
who they are
and get to know them and know why? So, I mean, even though we do instill those things, they still have a mind of their own, and they still need to go and experience the world. Yeah. And that's something Jake did, to a certain extent. And unfortunately, it did wind him up in a situation. But I think everything happens for a reason, and I think he will grow up to be a better human.
I mean, he's grown.
Well, he will continue to grow to be a better human. Because you wouldn't expect anything less. So.
No, and looking at, I'm very proud of my sons. I don't ever want people to think that I am not proud of my children. I am incredibly proud of both of my children, because They are their own people. And I see the things that they are providing to the world, and I am very proud of them. So I don't ever want anyone to like feel sorry for me or for us in that journey that we had to go on, because now I look at it as I can help other parents. I didn't necessarily want to be on that path, and I don't wish that on anyone ever. I don't ever wish that on anyone. But now looking forward, I can say I can help another parent,
Right.
because there's a lot of kids that get put in that situation.
Right. So how being a parent of a Black teenager, how do you deal with the knowing that something could happen at any minute just because of the race of your child? How do you process that?
You don't process it. You can't. You just hold your breath constantly and hope and pray that it does not happen. And when it does, you really have to look at it and say, okay, is this just? Is this fair? Is it right? Did my kid really do something to warrant them being in this situation? Sometimes yes. Sometimes kids do things that they do break the law and they do need to be put in certain situations. Oftentimes, no. So you can't really process that. You do. You walk around with, unease. You just do. That's the reality of having children in our country. You walk around with unease and you're tense a lot of the time, and you teach them certain things to, if they get pulled over, this is what you're supposed to do, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
It just isn't. And people say, oh, well, if they weren't doing X, Y, and Z, that's not necessarily the case. I live in a household that is multiracial. My husband is white. That's not the case. If my husband can see that they look at us differently, other people need to see it too. There was a point where I think Jacob was 13, and he had an airsoft pistol. And he's 13. He's a kiddo. He wanted to take it outside and start shooting at stuff with it. And his stepdad interjected and said, nope, you can't take it outside because they shoot people like us for no reason. And that was really hard for me to hear him say, because that's not something you expect your spouse to say to their stepchild, to be on the warn that if you take this outside, a neighbor will see you and call the police, and the police absolutely will shoot you.
Yeah.
So you hold your breath.
Yeah. Because I feel like, I mean, we have, as just a parent in general, we always have that sense of, you pray your kids are safe regardless of where they are or what they're doing, no matter what age that they are. I can't imagine the thoughts that go through a Black mother's head for their Black child.
I mean, it is.
I mean, in a way, I can because I sympathize, I empathize to the fullest, and so I do feel it, but I don't live it. That's where I'm trying to.
Here's
to
the
pull
reality
from.
of it, though. It is, since our country has been founded, our children have been victimized, and so it is not something that we ever have been without. It is just a badge that we carry. Once we become women and have a child, we know that that's a badge we carry, that there possibly might be something done to our children. It's just part of our lives. That's the bad part. Most people don't
part.
Yeah, people don't realize it. This is what it is.
Right.
You have a baby and your baby is Black, there's a possibility something is going to happen to it since our country was founded.
Right. Yeah.
So that is our reality as Black parents. It is, there's something that could happen to your child. Not necessarily, but there's the possibility.
Right.
So you never walk around not knowing what that's like.
Yeah.
That is our reality.
That is just a reality. That's a good way to put it. That is a very good way to put it.
Unfortunately, that's the way I have to live.
Sure.
That is,
and I'm sure that's the way that most Black families live.
that is just our reality. There's
Right.
no other reality.
Yeah.
That is what it is. So do we walk around thinking about it constantly? No, but it's
Right.
back
But
there.
It's in the back of the head. Yeah.
It's back there because we know it's there.
Right.
Do we live in fear? No, not really, but we know it's always back there lingering behind us.
Yeah. So to have it happen to you
Oh, it was just,
personally.
it was just the reality of that fear.
Yeah.
And it's traumatizing. And I don't think it's not. It's traumatizing. If you ever watch things about children and this happens to them, it does something to us. And our ancestors speak to us, and it you know, it's pretty much, you're hopeless because now they're in the system.
Yeah.
You're hopeless. There is nothing you can do.
Right. That's sad.
It is, but I mean,
It's reality, but it's very
it's a harsh reality.
it's a harsh reality.
It's a harsh reality, but it's reality.
And it's a I was going to say a bad word.
That's okay. You can curse.
I know.
You're,
But it's just fucked up that it has to happen
it is fucked up. I'm not.
for
Yeah.
minority families.
It's fucked up.
You know?
It's very fucked up.
And what's even worse is that it's 2024.
I mean,
It's like, what
So
are we
here-
doing?
here's the thing. The civil rights movement was not that long ago. That's I mean, people always say it's 2024. We should have progressed by now. We should have done this by now. Should we?
Yeah.
Because 1967 was not that long ago if you really look at it.
I don't know. Some of these TikToks are making 1990 feel like it's ancient.
Okay, but I mean, these are just young kids.
I know.
I'm sorry, children. You don't know anything.
Damn TikTok.
But, 58 years is not that long ago. I have siblings older than that.
Yeah.
So it really isn't that long ago. So in order to make any real progress, we have to fight a lot more. And we have to be more active than what we are.
Sure.
Especially Gen X. Because Gen X, I know y'all, we don't give a damn.
We sleep. We're asleep.
We don't
We
give
sleep
a
on stuff like this.
Yeah.
We can't. We got to wake up.
We don't give a damn. We don't care what's going on in Congress. We don't care what's going
Yeah.
on at Capitol Hill. But we should, because
Yeah.
that's the only way any real change is going to happen.
Right.
We have to band together. And we're actually one of the biggest generations. Even though the baby boomers got us by far, we're still a really big generation. And we have a voice. Granted, we don't use it like we should,
Right.
but we have one. And in order for us to invoke any real change in what goes on in our country, we have to be more active than what we are. And I'm guilty of that too. I really am. I'm guilty of it as well. Because most of us feel like our voice is not going to be heard.
Yeah,
and
because
no
they weren't.
change is
But
gonna
they
happen.
weren't back then,
Yeah.
So we did what we had to do to just kind of coast under the radar.
And I mean, granted, we use music as an expression, but that's not
Correct.
going to change laws.
Right. Exactly.
That's gonna make the impact that we need it to make.
Right.
And so in order for those kind of things to happen, we got to stop saying it's 2024 and we have to get out there and get in the very unjust political world so we can change some things.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to change just by us being mad about it.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. And everybody's mad. You can get mad about stuff. I got mad at the situation I was in. But you have to make room for change. You have to do something to make change.
Right. One of the chapters that you had, Brandy, it's called The Happening. And you stated a few times the troubled teen industry. You labeled it as an industry. I've never heard that phrase
You won't, because
before
you don't know what it is.
because you made it.
No, I
you
didn't
made
make it
up.
up.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, that's real.
And how long has it?
Since 1952.
Okay, then I'm just
Most people, okay, so most people have no idea what the troubled teen industry is. It is a string of schools and camps and correctional facilities that are all hummed in together to try to change our kids. And it is very real, and it's very privately funded, and sometimes it's government funded, and it's very lucrative.
wow.
It's very, very lucrative. I want to say about 15 years ago, Paris Hilton went to Capitol Hill to try to invoke change in some of these schools and some of these programs. That is the troubled teen industry.
Interesting.
So when you hear about boot camps, or you hear about wilderness programs, or therapy schools, or juvenile detention schools, that all is in the same pot together.
Interesting.
Together, and it does nothing but traumatize our children, abuse our children, and many times it kills our children.
I had no
And
idea
you
that
wouldn't.
this whole entire thing.
You wouldn't.
That's a whole nother podcast in itself.
You wouldn't. That's why I wrote about it, because that is what my son was involved in. Because if a kid does something that is deemed unruly by society, i.e., drinking, smoking, running away, doing things that are unsavory, that is when they say, you need therapy. You need to change the scenery. You need to sit in a detention center. You need this, you need that. And half the times, parents will sign their rights over to these facilities and not know what's going on.
Wow.
Because that's what they wanted to do with Jake. They wanted to put him in a boot camp because he was deemed a minor who needed supervision. Granted, he had two parents.
Right. Right.
He was supervised. He was just being unruly.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are not situations you ever want to put your child in.
Right.
There's a couple of documentaries on Netflix and Amazon Prime. If you really want to dig into the troubled teen industry, you can Google the troubled teen industry. It is very, very real, and it's all woven together. And 9 times out of 10, the kids that go into these programs come off way worse
Sure.
than when
Because
they
I'm
went
sure
in
they
there.
break them down, and then they
They do all kinds
They-
of stuff to.
I
I
can't
wrote
even
about it in
imagine.
my book. There's
Yeah,
several.
you
There's
did.
several things that happen to these kids, and that they don't always come out.
yeah.
They don't always come out. So I wanted to shed some light on that because it's all in there together.
Mm-hmm.
It's all tied together. Sometimes it's state funded, sometimes it's parent funded, but they have a lot of money. So no, I didn't make it up. I did a lot of research. That's why I was able to get my son out of that situation.
That's awesome.
Because knowledge is the key. If you have no idea what's going on, and most parents, when a judge tells you, I'm gonna send your kid to boot camp, 9 times out of 10, their parent will sign away their parental rights and send them to a boot camp, send them to a therapy school, send them to a wilderness program. Mm-hmm. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. Which is why the book is so impactful, because that's the road they wanted for my son.
Yeah.
So no, it's real. It's very, very
That's
real.
crazy. I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's very. You've heard of children's boot camps?
Well, I have, but I've never heard of the label troubled teen industry.
Yeah,
I
'cause
mean, that alone sounds governmental.
Yeah, it's an industry. It's designed to make people money.
To make people money, which is probably why that judge did what he did.
Yep, it's designed to make people money.
Yeah.
And if you ever get pieces of paper to sign your child over to one of these programs, you'll see that it's designed to get money
Yeah.
for your child, because there's costs
Wow.
involved in them.
That's crazy.
They want to charge your insurance if something is to happen to these kids. It's not what you think it is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, your book is definitely a wonderful read.
Thank you.
Definitely a dive into areas that I'm sure are not on everyone's, like, let's talk around the dinner table. But do you want to tell everyone where and how they can get your book?
So my book is available anywhere books are sold. You can buy it at Target. You can get it at Amazon. I prefer Amazon. It is exclusively at the Doc Bookshop in Fort Worth, and we will be having a book signing, the first book launch signing, on June the 29th. We will be at American Shaman in Fort Worth, and you can go to our website to get the address. We'll be there from 12 to 2, and I'll do a book reading, and we'll have some swag to give out, and we'll talk about our Hell of Friends podcast. So please support, because this book means a lot to me because it is my story. It's told from my perspective. I left my son's perspective out because I wanted to respect his privacy. But if you're a parent or you know someone who has had a child in that situation, please read it. It's very informative.
Absolutely. So that's our episode for this week. Thank you guys for joining us once again. Make sure to always like and subscribe to our podcast. We're on Instagram, we're on Threads, we're on TikTok, of course, YouTube.
And Spotify.
And Spotify. I always forget Spotify.
Yeah, we're on Spotify.
But you can get all of that on our, all the links are on our website, which is www.hella-friends.com. And as I always check our website.
Yep. And remember, life be lifin'.